Please be seated. Thought I'd preach up here today, especially so I can stand up here and say, Happy Mother's Day. Moms, today you're the center of attention, and with the sun shining so beautifully, I hope you have a really beautiful day. Did you notice, however, one of the ironies of today? Often on Mother's Day, we celebrate what you do for us instead of simply the love we have for you. As an example, the card that my son got for our wife starts off like this. Let me rephrase that. The card that my son got for his mother, my wife. Got that? Okay. It starts off like this. Mom, in appreciation for all the loving things you've always done for me. That's the idea. What she does for us, what you do for us. But rest assured, we really do love you. And if this is true for Mom, it's even more true for God. We far too often, celebrate what God does for us instead of simply celebrating our love for God. You know that old hymn, Abide With Me? If you don't know it, it's hymn 662 in your hymnal. And don't worry, I'm not going to sing it. But let me recite for you just the first verse, and you'll see what I mean. Abide with me, fast falls the eventide. The darkness deepens, Lord, with me abide. When other helpers fail and comforts flee, help of the helpless, oh, abide with me. See, it's what God does for us, the help God gives to us. Come here, God, help me. Come here, God, and abide with me. Really and truly, that's not a bad plea. We do need God's help. And it is important to acknowledge that without God's endless love for us, we would be lost. Moreover, like any parent, God always offers us all the help He can, even if we don't recognize it or don't want the help. And yet, what if instead of saying, abide with me, we say, Lord, I abide with thee? And yeah, I know you can say, I abide with you, but it doesn't rhyme, so I'm sticking with abide with thee. But what do I mean? Simply that when we say, abide with me, we may think we're focusing on God, but we're really focusing on us. What if we focus our attention and our desire on God instead? Just loving God and knowing God intimately. Not for anything God does, but just for God. In John's gospel today, Jesus is telling his disciples to keep his commandments just as he kept the Father's commandments. And chief among them, to abide in God's love. To abide with God. Abiding with God, dwelling with God, focusing on God, making and spending time with God, our holy parent, is our first goal and command. Remember the summary of the law? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Everything else follows from that. As today's collect says, pour into our hearts such love towards you that we, loving you in all things and above all things, may obtain your promises which exceed all that we can desire. Loving you in all things and above all things. Getting to know God And the rest will not only follow, but it'll make sense. And by the rest, I mean the help God gives us and the help we give each other. I mention this because just as surely as we too often look at God for what God can do for us, we also often only look at ourselves, the church, for what we can do for others. Again, this isn't to say that serving others isn't important. It's an incredibly important part of the church's mission. Loving our neighbors tangibly, feeding the hungry, housing the homeless, comforting the despairing, healing the sick, seeking justice. They are all part of the stewardship of creation that God has given us. But if they don't start with knowing and loving God, then they are empty and meaningless. They are a path to depression and despair. Without the foundational love and focus on God, there's no point to what we do. When we take our focus off of our holy parent, we simply shrivel up inside. You may hear a lot of people talking about, the church is dying. We've lost the people. There's no more life in the church. Hogwash. The church can only truly die when the center of our being is no longer God. On the other hand, when we abide with God, when we intentionally spend time with God, and let's face it, on Mother's Day, what do moms want more than anything? Just the kids to spend time with them. So when we intentionally spend time with God, we are given not only purpose and a sense of meaning, but the power and the strength and the resolve to fulfill it with joy. That's why we have the Eucharist week after week after week. That's why we have Bible study week after week after week. That's why we have choir every week at the 10 o'clock service and music at this service. We have Doug. And I'll bet you if you want to sing with him, he wouldn't mind. And that's why we have things like the Rail Trail Pilgrimage, so that we can intentionally abide with God. Love of our parents is, for most of us, our starting point in life. You learn trust from them. And at least initially, you learn your values from them. And you embrace them. Mother's Day is, of course, a reminder of the importance of parents whom you can trust and, more importantly, whom you can love, who you can learn from, whom you can obey with confidence. That's what we celebrate today. And by the way, that's what we'll celebrate again next month on Father's Day. Same thing. And if it is true for our earthly parents, how much more so is it true for God, the parent of us all? It's good to think of what God does for us. I'm truly thankful. It's good to think of what God calls us to do. I embrace that mission. But it's better to think of God. No, not only think of God, but to dwell with God. And so today, my prayer, and I hope your prayer is, Lord, may I abide with thee. Amen.